Good afternoon and good evening. I'm Lani Dormiendo, Officer in Charge of the Philippine Board of Investments International Investments Promotion Service. It is my pleasure to welcome you all in today's webinar entitled Global Healthcare Information Management Services, powered by the Philippines Resiliency Amidst the Pandemic. Today's event will run for about an hour and a half, and we are fortunate to be joined by the Philippine government officials who will deliver their opening and welcome messages, highlighting the current Philippine business environment that supports the entry and growth of the healthcare information management services or HIMS sector in the country. This will be followed by presentations on HIMS landscape, which is one of the fastest growing subsectors of the IT business process management industry in the Philippines. We will also be featuring four real case studies on the delivery of specific healthcare IT and BPM related services to the US market, emphasizing how Philippine-based companies have helped and could support the US firms in building up and sustaining your operations, especially in this time of the pandemic. Focus topics would be on revenue cycle management, healthcare IT and data analytics and cloud-based healthcare solutions, pharmacovigilance, and clinical research and trial services. We will allot about 40 minutes for all the presentations, and we will be having a 20-minute Q&A and panel discussion prior to the synthesis and closing of the program. For your questions, you may submit them anytime during the event using the Q&A box. Our moderators will be taking note of them and will raise them during the panel discussion. In case we are unable to answer all your questions in today's event, be assured that we will respond to you after the webinar. Thank you, and I hope that we'll have a productive session.
Welcome to the webinar, Global HIMS powered by PH, Resiliency Amidst the Pandemic. This event is brought to you by HIMAP, Healthcare Information Management Association of the Philippines, in cooperation with the Department of Trade and Industry Board of Investment, Export Marketing Bureau, and the Philippine Trade Centers of Silicon Valley, Los Angeles, Washington, and New York. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to HIMS Philippines. To formally open our webinar, let us welcome the Deputy Chief of Mission, Embassy of the Philippines, Washington, D.C., Jaime Ramon Ascalon.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you. First, I do hope all of you are keeping healthy and safe, especially with the resurgence of COVID-19 cases both in the United States and the Philippines. We remain hopeful that both our countries will be able to manage the spread of this virus soon. I wish to acknowledge Secretary Ramon Lopez of our Department of Trade and Industry, who will deliver his welcome remarks in a few moments. Since the pandemic hit in the early 2020, Secretary Lopez has seen to it that business operations of our MSMEs, exporters, and foreign investors in the Philippines have been able to continue despite quarantine measures imposed to control the spread of the virus. The DTI and the Board of Investments have continuously supported U.S. companies that have operations in the Philippines when the pandemic hit. Today, he will discuss the current economic landscape in the Philippines and what the government and industry have been doing to restart the economy, including such key government initiatives as the CREATE Bill, fast-tracking digitalization, and other policy reforms, all aimed at improving the business environment in the Philippines. The BOI, which recently launched the Make It Happen in the Philippines campaign, has also identified a number of priority sectors for foreign investments, and this event is part of our efforts to attract more investments in strategic growth sectors for both the US and the Philippines. 2021 is an important year for both our countries as we celebrate 75 years of our diplomatic relations. In the last few months, we have organized a number of virtual briefings to highlight one of the most important components of our relations, our economic ties. We looked at areas for collaboration such as renewable energy, education, and sustainable development. During the US-Philippines Business Dialogue last June, we were fortunate to have C-level officials from major companies such as San Miguel Corporation, Jollibee, ON Semiconductors, and Concentrix. As you may all know, one of the key growth areas in the Philippines is the information technology and business process management services sector. This sector employs over 1 million Filipinos, providing services to U.S. companies such as customer support, software development, and accounting, financial services, just to name a few. The Philippines has for many years been a frontrunner in the IT and business process outsourcing space. From its humble beginnings as a small industry in the early 2000s, the IT industry now employs around 1.3 million Filipinos and generated revenues of about 26 billion US dollars in 2019. In addition, the industry has had multiplier effect in the Philippines through increased consumer spending, the opening of allied businesses such as restaurants and convenience stores, and more opportunities for our fresh graduates. The IT industry has also contributed to the establishment of second and third wave cities, thereby spreading development to other parts of the country outside the capital. Our mastery of the English language, a young and dynamic workforce, and our deep connection to the United States are just some of the advantages offered by the Philippines in this sector. Tonight's presentations will focus on one of the fastest growing subsectors of the Itbpm industry in the Philippines, which is the Health Information Management Services, or what we call HIMS. Here in the United States, most of us are used to accessing our health information online through a click of a button. We see a breakdown of our insurance payments for doctor's visits on a mobile app, and so on. But behind all these conveniences is a lot of work which is done primarily by companies in the Philippines. In the past years, the HIMS sector has attracted many global players to the country. The services offered by our companies in the Philippines also help the many Filipino doctors and nurses that are practicing here in the United States. The Philippine IT industry, particularly the health information management sector, quickly adapted to changes brought about by the pandemic. In a few short months, they've transitioned to almost full work capacity despite the very challenging global environment. And the sector continues to grow, especially with telemedicine and the use of digital tools by clinics and hospitals as a response to adapting to the pandemic. Tonight, we are fortunate to have with us a number of resource persons from the HIMS sector who will discuss the health information management services landscape in the Philippines. Plus, a special focus on 4 case studies where the Philippines was able to deliver specific healthcare IT and BPM related services to the US market. We will also look into how they adjusted to the pandemic, especially in these times when costs and efficiency are key considerations for many businesses amidst these economic difficulties. I do hope you will find this webinar useful, and I wish you all a good and productive session. Thank you and mabuhay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jaime Ramon Ascalon, Deputy Chief of Mission, Embassy of the Philippines, Washington, D.C. To welcome all of us to today's event and to give an overview of the Philippine business landscape, please welcome the Secretary of the Department of Trade and Industry, Ramon Lopez.
Ladies and gentlemen, a good morning to you all. On behalf of the Department of Trade and Industry, we welcome the American business community to this webinar on the Philippines Healthcare Information Management Service, or HIMS. We also want to recognize the Philippine Board of Investment, the Healthcare Information Management Association of the Philippines, as well as our Philippine Trade and Investment Centers in the U.S. for organizing today's event. This webinar is part of our Make It Happen in the Philippines global investment campaign to showcase priority sectors in the country that our friends abroad can consider for investment. While the Philippines continues to address the economic challenges of COVID-19 pandemic, we are already seeing very encouraging results in the country's road to economic recovery. Our 2021 second quarter GDP results just came out yesterday, and it posted a rebound of a positive 11.8% growth, driven by 22.3% growth of manufacturing and 25.7% growth in the construction sector. Meanwhile, the manufacturing PMI or PMI index remained above the crucial 50 threshold at 50.4 in July. And our exports rebounded to double-digit growth, up 72% in April, 31% in May, and 9.5% in June. We were also able to maintain our unemployment rate at 7.7% in June as more and more industries open up. You should remember that last year, April of 2020, the unemployment rate went up to as high as 17.7%, and it's now down to 7.7%. Consumer and business confidence are also starting to recover. What's more, FDI in April increased by 114% compared with same month last year. Our investment or foreign investment pledges alone for January to June 2021 compared to previous year is 16% higher. Going back to FDI, year-to-date May figure is close to 40% growth. The Philippines also retained its investment grade in credit ratings from major international credit rating agencies, lending further credibility that recovery is in sight. Before the pandemic, the Philippines was one of the fastest growing economies in Asia, with an average growth rate of 6.6% from 2016 to 2019. While our economic managers are working hard to bring the country close to pre-pandemic growth rates, the World Bank expects the Philippine economy to bounce back to around 4.7% in 2021 and 5.9% in 2022. The Philippines also has a rising population of 110 million that has a demographic sweet spot and an average age, a young age of 25 years old, which means several decades ahead with a very good resource base. It now provides a rich pool of 45 million manpower resource needed for growth. This is also a continuously growing consumer base number with increasing income and purchasing power. More importantly, this highly skilled, educated, and cost-competitive talent pool is one of the key advantages of the Philippines, as mentioned by many foreign investors in the country. That makes Philippines a preferred location, for example, for Itbpm services, especially for high-value healthcare information management services. And we'd like to point out that despite the pandemic, HIMS operations in the country remain unhampered. We would also like to mention that as we continue to combat the spread of COVID-19 and its variants, including the Delta variant, we continue to push for massive and meaningful economic reforms that would make the ease of doing business even more for investors. Currently, we are already implementing the game-changing corporate recovery and tax incentives for enterprises, or otherwise known as CREATE Act, that rationalizes, modernizes, and offers more relevant incentives to investors. The Act provides the President the flexibility in granting fiscal and non-fiscal incentives for high-value strategic investments, including longer time period for enjoying income tax holidays and subsidies for key cost items. It also allows the availment of income tax holidays from 4 years to 7 years, depending on the level of technology and the location of the project. The ITH will be followed by another 10 years of either enhanced deductions or a special corporate income tax of 5% tax on gross income earned, in lieu of all taxes, for export-oriented enterprises. Other key features of the Act that can be enjoyed by foreign investors include the removal of export and nationality bias. It also grants the President flexibility in granting incentives for highly desirable projects with a minimum investment capital of 50 billion pesos or can generate at least 10,000 jobs for up to 40 years. Lastly, HIMS and Itbpm services are part of the priority sectors eligible for incentives under our 2020 Investment Priorities Plan, which is now adopted as a transitional Strategic Investment Priorities Plan, SIPP, under CREATE. To accelerate the growth of innovation-led and technology-intensive industries, the BOI has also partnered with the Commission on Higher Education, and DepEd to upskill and reskill our people under the transnational higher education law. This partnership will help us to map the skills requirement of emerging industries, even as it focuses on STEAM education or science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics to produce a more future-ready workforce. Of course, this will include the Itbpm and HIMS sector. Before the pandemic, we also commenced initiatives on digitalization to facilitate online business registration in different government offices. While this was part of Philippine President Rodrigo Roa Duterte's push to remove long queues in government offices for our people, this leap to digitalization was timely as it allowed for greater ease of doing business during this COVID-19 pandemic. The EO number 127 signed by President Duterte in March of 2021 will also soon be implemented with the finalization of the IRR, Implementing Rules and Regulation, a process led by the Department of Information and Communications Technology. This is, to me, a great equalizer as this will empower the geographically isolated areas with interconnectivity, giving everyone access to internet and information. This, in the present day, is a basic human right and something, to me, that will pave the way to an inclusive and more prosperous society. Lastly, we've enacted major policy reforms that have made it easier for companies to do business in the Philippines. These include the Ease of Doing Business Act, the Philippine Innovation Act, the Revised Corporation Code, and the Telecommuting Act. We'd like to reiterate that the Philippines considers the U.S. as one of our strongest partners in trade and investment. Last year, the U.S. was our third major trading partner, our second top export market, and our third chief import source. Furthermore, the U.S. was our top source of approved investments in 2020. Presently, Itbpm remains as one of the top industry investments in the Philippines by U.S. firms, with HIMS as one of the fastest growing subsectors, achieving a double-digit growth despite the pandemic. In closing, we invite you all to participate in the discussions as well as subsequent presentations on how to do HIMS related business in the Philippines, as well as opportunities in partnerships between both of our countries in the HIMS sector. For any business inquiries and concern, you may reach out to the BOI as the focal point of contact in the Philippines and our 4 Philippine Trade and Investment Centers in the U.S., specifically in New York, in Washington, D.C., in Silicon Valley, and L.A. We want to assure you that together with the HIMAP, we remain committed in realizing the global business goals of your company in the Philippines, especially as it would help to create jobs and employment for our people. Moreover, we aim to be a strong partner of the U.S. in building back towards a better, brighter, post-pandemic future. Together, let us make it happen in the Philippines. Thank you, and mabuhay po tayong lahat.
Thank you very much, DTI Secretary Ramon Lopez. Before we move on to the next presentation, we will be playing a short video to introduce the healthcare information management services offered from the Philippines. Please watch this 3-minute video.
Welcome to HIMAP, the Healthcare Information Management Association of the Philippines. The healthcare industry is experiencing transformative change. The increasing demand and rising costs for healthcare-related services by an aging world population are driving all aspects of the healthcare industry to reevaluate existing and to innovate new processes and solutions to cost-effectively meet the growing needs. HIMAP is an integral part of this transformation. In an ever-expanding digital world, electronic protected health information is proving to be invaluable. This data is securely recorded, stored, and utilized by healthcare providers, payers, and pharmaceutical entities in a myriad of ways from revenue cycle management aspects to clinical decision support services. Today's enhanced data analytics initiatives have contributed greatly to significant improvements in the quality and cost of care. Enterprising leaders across all industries recognize and for over a decade have capitalized on the capabilities that the Philippines provides. The combination of highly skilled and motivated workforce, competitive costs, strong government support, and a robust infrastructure have propelled the Philippines into the #1 destination in professional voice services to the world. At the heart of this successful growth is the Philippine Allied Health Professional. With an intrinsic culture of care and unparalleled clinically trained resources, the Philippines is the destination for access to a young, motivated workforce that adapts seamlessly into the digital age of information and utilization. Keeping up with the constantly evolving healthcare industry and capitalizing on all the benefits of technological advancements require a partner with proven industry expertise, innovative thinking, and access to properly trained personnel and a strong commitment to excellence. Members of HIMAP possess all these attributes and more. The Healthcare Information Management Association of the Philippines. We care like no other.
And now, to provide us with a background of the HIMS services offered from the Philippines, highlighting the strengths of working with and partnering with Philippine-based companies, and to talk about the healthcare information management services landscape in the Philippines, let us all welcome the Vice President of HIMAP, Mr. Vincent Remo.
Hello, my name is Vincent Remo. I am the Vice President for Solutions Development in a Japanese-owned, Filipino-powered IT company called Advanced World Solutions Incorporated. Today, however, I am representing HIMAP, the Healthcare Information Management Association of the Philippines. HIMAP is an industry association of companies providing healthcare information management services to the global market. I know you attended today's webinar for your own specific reason. It could be plain information gathering, checking for a possible location for expansion, or exploring the possibility of partnering with existing companies in the Philippines. Whatever your reason is, I hope to give light to where the Philippines is today in the area of HIMS, and in so doing, help you decide, hoping you would seriously consider starting or expanding your operations in the Philippines. HIMAP is a nonprofit organization of healthcare BPO or BPM players. HIMAP member companies offer a variety of solutions and services that cater to healthcare providers, payers, and pharmaceutical companies. HIMAP focuses on promoting the Philippines as a destination of choice, a partner for providing healthcare information management services. It also promotes collaboration among industry stakeholders as well as government entities in the Philippines in building skills and capabilities needed to provide globally competitive solutions and services. The IT and business process management industry in the Philippines has gained traction since the late 1990s. As shown in the graph on the left side of the slide, there has been a consistent year-on-year growth of over 5% until year 2019, providing 1.3 million jobs as a $26 billion industry. As you can see, the industry still grew despite the pandemic in year 2020. If we zoom in to the healthcare information management sector on the right side of the slide, we can see that it contributes more than 10% to the Itbpm industry, giving jobs to 147,000 full-time equivalent with a total revenue of over $3 billion. The healthcare subsector is growing fast as the country offers a large pool of professionals licensed in the medical field, including US licensed nurses. Lately, the services offered from the Philippines have also expanded to cover higher value services such as clinical research, analytics, and life sciences. A research published by the Everest Group shows that the IT BPM industry in the Philippines still has a good potential for growth. somewhere between 3 to 5%. It has the potential to become a $29 billion industry in the year 2022. So, if you're looking for a location to expand your operations, put the Philippines at the top of your list, in the same manner that the other global MNCs did. What can the Philippines offer? First, let's talk about talent. The Philippines has a 98% literacy rate with more than 750,000 higher education graduates every year, including over 42,000 from the medical and allied health courses. Filipinos are also known for being able to adapt to different cultures and are praised for their empathy and for being service oriented. Let's talk about talent in the healthcare field, nurses in particular. Here's how the Philippines fare against the rest of the world. Slide shows that the Philippines has the highest passing rate in the NCLEX RN for US licensure at 44%. 2018 data shows that there were more than 9,000 passers for the licensure examination for nurses in the Philippines. In addition, there were more than 4,600 newly licensed pharmacists on that year. Imagine those passers joining your workforce. Definitely, you will be able to offer high-quality services, not to mention the possibility of conceptualizing new care delivery models with this breed of talents. Now, here is a summary of the Itbpm services offered from the Philippines. The Philippines is the destination of choice for voice-related services. Contact center services is where it all started for the Philippines. This slide, however, says strength beyond voice. This is because the Philippines also offers other Itbpm services, color-coded in this chart as animation, game development, global shared services, IT and software, and of course, healthcare. For healthcare, there are four major categories shown here, but my next slide will give you more details about healthcare information management services. Let me now focus on healthcare services and solutions provided by HIMAP member companies. Our services cover the key players of the healthcare industry, namely the providers, payers, and pharma. For providers, we have companies processing medical billings, doing medical coding, case management, and all aspects of revenue cycle management. For payers, we have companies doing credentialing, benefit management, utilization review, as well as fraud and abuse management. For pharmaceutical companies, services provided include clinical research, pharmacovigilance, pharmacy benefit management, as well as other regulatory support. Beneath all of these services is technology, from hospital systems, intelligent AI assistants, to data analytics and robotic process automation. There are even new services and solutions being created or customized for every new engagement. This stems out from the fact that HIMAP member companies are quite flexible in their engagement with clients, bearing in mind that the ultimate goal is to make the journey of the patient as pleasant as possible. We asked companies who have considered locating in the Philippines about their reasons for doing so, and here is a summary of those reasons. One would be rising costs and margin pressures, thus the push towards outsourcing. Another reason would be the COVID-19 vaccine rollout, because this means that the volume of transactions will dramatically increase, and there will be a need for more workers in the HIMS sector. During the pandemic in 2020, companies providing healthcare information management services in the Philippines were able to quickly shift to working from home, a testimony to the reliability of the infrastructure and of having a flexible working model. Resiliency was shown especially during the pandemic, and for that reason, Philippine-based companies have been given additional opportunities. For those who wish to set up shop on their own, government incentives are also available. Please feel free to contact our trade representatives for more details. Another question to ask is about where to locate within the Philippines. It used to be that the operations of companies in the Itbpm sector are concentrated in the capital city of Manila. But as of this time, more and more companies are drawn towards expanding their operations to other cities, considering availability of talent, infrastructure, and ease of doing business, not to mention work-life balance. So join us in the Philippines. Here is the roster of HIMAP member companies. You can see that this is a combination of global multinational companies as well as homegrown service and solutions companies. It is also a combination of service providers and solutions providers. Some companies concentrate on revenue cycle management. Others focus on pharmacovigilance as well as clinical trials, while some others focus on IT, healthcare systems, AI assistance, data analytics, among others. There will be case studies later on about these services and solutions, so watch out for that. The Philippines is definitely a great choice, whether you are looking for a partner or looking for your next location to set up shop, or simply trying to improve the human touch aspect of the services that you provide. You'll get all of this by working with Filipino professionals under flexible engagement models at a globally competitive price. This is particularly true for the healthcare sector. We have proven time and again that we are a reliable partner. Resilient as we are there when needed, providing high value, high quality services while incorporating the culture of care and the culture of empathy in every aspect of the work we do. In HIMAP, we have this motto: Healthcare Philippines, we care like no other. Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of the webinar.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vincent Remo, Vice President of the Healthcare Information Management Association of the Philippines. To further illustrate the point highlighted by HIMAP, our next speaker will share with us the steps and challenges in setting up operations in the Philippines. Let us listen to a real case study on how to start healthcare BPO operations in the Philippines from someone who actually built and grew his company from ground up. Let us all welcome the President of Adec Innovations, Mr. James Donovan.
Thank you very much to HIMAP for this invitation today and the opportunity to share our company's story. To the guest and the attendees of this webinar, I hope you're all doing well and staying safe. I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Jim Donovan, co-founder and CEO of Adec Innovations. Wherever you are in the world, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Adec Innovations, what do we do? Our goal is to advance sustainable practices around the world, and we do this by delivering fully integrated environment, social, and governance assurance solutions. Our business covers four main areas. We deliver professional services, technology, workforce solutions, and capital support services. Who do we do this for? We do it for governments, we do it for coalitions and NGOs, and the private sector. I'd like to give a bit of a snapshot. First and foremost, we are proudly founded in the Philippines. For over 30 years, we've been actually delivering successful services. Today, we're very proud to say we have 20 sites in over 17 countries worldwide. We have over 4,500 full-time employees and supporting 10,000 plus customers, supported by our 50,000 enterprise support services. Half of Adec's business portfolio is workforce solutions. The other half is professional services, healthcare, software services, and education. It bears highlighting. One of the highlights that we'd like to point out is the healthcare services segment. This is one of our fastest growing businesses, and it's really been triggered in the past year and a half by the high level of demand by the pandemic. And the overflow of this demand is expected to continue in the coming years. This is going to be our new normal operating environment. Ready to meet the demands of the new normal environment, Adec Healthcare has solutions for the back office needs of our clients. Currently, we have over 340 healthcare professionals, 70% which are registered Philippine nurses. Leveraging on these resources and capabilities, our services include medical management, revenue cycle management, and digital healthcare management. By the numbers, we annually conduct over just under 700,000 clinical utilization reports. We have 140,000 billing claims, 59,000 benefit verifications processed, and over 21,000 direct patient education and outreach programs. The Adec healthcare journey. As with any business, our journey has had its fair share of challenges along the way and some successes. Prior to the launch of Adec's dedicated healthcare brand, our group was providing data management services in the US and to Australian hospitals. We engaged the medical transcription business through the years through our BPO arm. And in 2011, we entered into a joint venture with a leading global pharmaceutical distributor to establish Pharma KPO. This was a milestone for Adec's official entry into the healthcare space, a joint venture to address the knowledge process outsourcing requirements of some of the different players in the industry. In 2017, we proudly unveiled the Adec Innovation Healthcare brand. We built an integrated and customizable product suite aimed at supporting our clients' delivery of healthcare services. Adec's strategic healthcare acquisitions help continue to foster our growth and success. Our 1 + 1 = 10 formula in addressing a value proposition when we're looking at acquisitions has never changed. In 2018, we acquired a SPI Philippines Healthcare, the healthcare arm of SPI Global in the country. Driven by the increasing demand of outsourced healthcare services coming from the Philippines, this acquisition has served as our catalyst in penetrating the market. Although the Philippines is known for its quality of nurses, during the time of the pandemic, it's continued to be a bit of a challenge in attracting experienced personnel from the healthcare sector, and remains tough competition. Adec maintains a healthcare support that throughout the Philippines, with sites not only in Metro Manila, but also in Dumaguete and Bacolod. The multiple sites allow us to have additional resources and redundancy, especially throughout the pandemic. Our future strategy is to continue to grow our healthcare portfolio and open up the clients in the Western Asia and European market. We also intend to expand our operations in Africa and the Middle East to support the growing demand of health information management. To summarize our journey in the Philippines, it has been successful because of the following factors we believe. First was the quality of services delivered by Filipino talents and the cost-effective business environment in the country. Second, the Philippines' reputation as a leader in the Itbpm sector. Clients, investors have become more confident through the years, and therefore healthcare service delivery is established and growing in the country. And third, of course, enough can't be said about the Filipino talent. As mentioned during the previous presentation, there's an undeniable resources in the country, nurses in the country that companies can tap on to deliver healthcare requirements for their clients. And lastly, I'd like to mention the unwavering support that we've received, and I think anyone would experience, that's provided by the Philippine government and the business associations to existing and upcoming players in the industry. I'd like to mention a few: the Bureau of Investments, BOI, the Department of Trade and Industry, Department of Information and Communications Technology, and individually and collectively played a critical role in driving and promoting the Philippines as a world-class IT BPM hub. In addition, new players and existing competitors are fortunate to have the constant guidance and support from various industry associations, such as HIMAP and IBPAP. It is a combination of these factors, plus a strong value proposition to the market, that has made for a formula for success for Adec, and I believe for future players coming to the country. Thank you all for the opportunity to share our journey, Adec Healthcare's journey. I hope to find some value and learning in our story. I'd like to thank all of you for your attention and kind indulgence, and enjoy the rest of this seminar. Thank you.
Thank you once again to Mr. James Donovan, President of Adec Innovations. Truly, the Philippines has been the home of highly skilled professionals who have been providing healthcare IT and BPM-related services to the U.S. market delivered from the Philippines. For the second part of our webinar, we will focus on our theme, Global Healthcare Information Management Services Powered by PH, Resiliency Amidst the Pandemic. We will present 4 companies. Each one will share their own experiences in starting their operations, including growth strategies implemented, as well as how they adjusted their operations to cope with the challenges during the pandemic. For our first case study, we will focus on revenue cycle management. Let us all welcome our speaker, the Senior Manager for Revenue Cycle Operations Asia of WorldSource, Mr. Don Isip.
All right. Well, thank you so much for that introduction. I appreciate it. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on which part of the world you are in. I do hope that everyone is safe and sound. So my name is Don Isip. I am the Senior Manager for WorldSource Pedigree. All right. So I was invited to talk about a brief case study as to how a revenue cycle management organization show resilience amidst pandemic. So before I start, let me introduce my organization. WorldSource is an 11-year-old major-scale enterprise. It's a global company under the Pedigree umbrella. We provide end-to-end revenue cycle management services that includes medical coding, medical billing, call center, attorney liaison, and the like. This slide shows the revenue cycle management. I'm pretty sure that some of you have encountered a more complex cycle. We're using this cycle in-house because it encompasses everything that is needed, and it actually covers what a regular revenue cycle associate needs to identify or needs to find out. So revenue cycle management in medical practice during pandemic, it is a known fact that everyone has been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. As an industry, about 50% drop in the volume has been noticed mid-half of 2020 as the pandemic started with all lockdowns and all. As the United States started to open up again, the industry has gotten back about 90% of overall volume as the year started, and testing, vaccination, telemedicine, and urgent care services are increasing. We have noticed this as a couple of biggest COVID testing and vaccination companies in Georgia and a couple of small COVID testing and vaccine company in Texas and California are client of ours, and we help them out on starting their said business. And now as we speak, the United States is on the third surge of pandemic. We thought that these aspects of healthcare services will start to wind down, but no, it wasn't. It is continuing. So the 2 main pain points that we identified with our clients during this pandemic is the resource and the information security and compliance. So for the resource, healthcare companies in the United States has been inclined on getting offshore services to have the work done as it is pretty cost effective. During pandemic, number of people resigned on their end and has been laid off due to cost cutting. And we, as an organization, provided assistance to the manpower and resources need through the following interventions. We provided support for end-to-end RCM needs, not limited to medical coding, billing, AR specialist, account coordinator, attorney liaison, call center, both voice and non-voice. We also embrace the hybrid working models. We have work from office. We have 2 sites here in the Philippines, one in Manila and one in Iloilo. So on top of work from office, we have work from home. This is telecommuting. And then we are also on the talks about the contingent workforce. And in order for us to make sure that we are abreast with all the changes that is happening in the healthcare field, we also enhance the training and continuing professional education models and curriculum that we have in-house. We got a new client that is associated with ideology, and to make sure that we understand everything as much as possible with radiology billing, we made a tailor-fitted training curriculum to this specific client. And so far, they're happy, and they're actually requested for an additional FTE. We also have a Lean Six Sigma certification, and we made sure as well that these certifications being applied on all the processes that we have inside the organization. We also embrace digital world and revenue cycle management operations, including automation and robotics. We also revisited the contract and renegotiating the contract. They are affected by the pandemic. We are affected. So, it's a matter of good professional relationship. So we did some changes for that. And the good thing is majority of our clients actually stayed with us. We have additional clients. We have a couple of clients associated with COVID testing and vaccination. So because of those interventions, we can see here on the chart as well that there is an increase on the FTE count from the number that we have here in the Philippines in 2020. It increased almost half of that number for 2021. Next pain point are the security and compliance. So as an organization, we heavily invested in information security. Phishing, that was really rampant right now, and we need to make sure that everyone understand what this malicious email and activities is all about. When it comes to revenue cycle management, we're actually dealing with PHI, secure documents, important documents associated with patients and the clients. On top of that, we need to be compliant as well with all the processes. We have compliance partners to ensure that we follow all the supposed revenue cycle processes from end to end. We are also connected with HBMA. In fact, our COO, Emily Osatek, is the current president of HBMA. We really need to make sure that we are compliant with all the processes that we have in-house. All right, so that's pretty much it. We have a limited time, so that's pretty much it on my end. And once again, thank you so much for having me, HIMAP, and talk to you during the panel discussion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Don Isip, Senior Manager for Revenue Cycle Operations Asia of WorldSource. Up next, we have our case study on health IT data analytics and cloud-based healthcare solutions. Please welcome the President of Connext Global Solutions, Mr. Tim Mobley.
Thank you for joining us today. My name is Tim Mobley, the President of Connext Global Solutions. At Connext, we help clients build, train, and manage their remote teams to accelerate growth. Today, I'd like to share an interesting project that involves data, analysis of that data, and implementation of change for a 50-physician medical group in the United States. This physician group had a challenge with low physician productivity, and there were several contributing factors. The compensation model wasn't sufficiently tied to productivity and was widely viewed as unfair. The physicians didn't get real-time feedback on productivity or other performance measurements, and the data existed across 3 organizations and several different data sources. So in order to address this, we started by working with the physician leadership to establish the metrics that were important. Then we created dashboards to provide feedback on those metrics. And kind of the heart of this project was working on the analysis necessary to restructure the compensation model in a way that worked and also in a way that everyone could understand and buy into. And then we supported the communication and organizational change necessary to be successful. For the dashboards, honed in on a few metrics that the group determined were important. RVUs are a measure of physician work and RVUs per hour productivity. So that was critical. A couple others that you can see here. Then we also displayed each of these metrics on a stack chart for the entire organization and distributed it to everyone so that each physician could see where they stood relative to the rest of the group. And we created an automated production and distribution process. Then the fun part was figuring out how to restructure the compensation. It was quite complicated. I'm going to hit a few high points here. We started by adjusting the collections for payer mix so that no one was at risk for payer mix. Then we developed this concept of base contributions, which was their collections minus the portions of their wages tied to productivity. And the goal was to minimize the variance of base contribution. Thus, everyone was contributing equally to the overhead of the group, but beyond that, sharing in the higher productivity that they individually generated. And then, so we worked to minimize the variance in the base contribution. And then we also had to communicate and display the community benefits that didn't vary with productivity. So the result of this project was a 12% increase in physician productivity. With 50 physicians and each one making several $100,000, the savings by reducing the physician headcount requirement by 3, 4, 5 quickly adds up. In addition to the financial benefits, there were a number of soft benefits as well, including increased satisfaction with the compensation, and then improvements in metrics that were important to the hospital, improving the relationship between the physician group and their hospital partner. So thank you all. There's more information available at connex.solutions/analytics.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tim Mobley, President of Connext Global Solutions. Moving on to our next case study, let us talk about pharmacovigilance. To give us an actual example of how a pharmacovigilance service was delivered from the Philippines, let us all welcome the General Manager, Cognizant, Mr. Prasad C. Nayak.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Prasad Nayak. I'm the engagement leader for Cognizant Philippines, and I manage the pharmacovigilance projects in Manila. So Cognizant Philippines, we are into business operations, pharmacovigilance, and medical device complaints. We have our office in Manila as well as Cebu. So today I'm going to speak about our delivery from Manila as well as Cebu. So as you can see, we have a track record of executing several large-scale PV programs. This is a list of all the PV engagements that we are executing from the Philippines. And you can see we are catering to global pharmaceutical organizations all over the world. And what we do in terms of scope of work for some of these pharmaceutical organizations is end-to-end case processing and medical assessment of all their case types. We're catering to a large German pharmaceutical where we are operating for them from 2 locations. We also are catering to a large Japanese pharmaceutical organization, and we do case processing for them as well. Also, for today's discussion, I've picked up a case study for a large American biopharmaceutical company, and I'll walk you through the case study on how we have executed the business process outsourcing for them. So just a quick overview of the client. The client is a Fortune 100 biopharmaceutical corporation. The engagement is operated out of US and Manila. And the scope of work is collect data related to safety and adverse event through patients, nurses, physicians, and pharmacists who call in to report an event or a complaint. This team collects information about the events and questions specific related to the event are asked during this particular discussion. We support this engagement with 66 agents or customer service executives in US and Manila. We've handled approximately 125,000 calls in 2019. Moving on to the more specifics, the business challenge that the client was facing, they had a large backlog of adverse events and product quality cases waiting for acquisition. Uh, the client's call center had difficulty meeting the industry standards for service level agreements and abandonment rate. They also saw an increase in the calls related to stability during the natural disasters, for example, hurricanes, and their abandon rate and call wait times were increasing. The solution that was provided to the client was to hire a pool of registered nurses here in Manila, and the goal was to decrease the backlog. We began with 7 specialists and then expanded to 22 specialists for inbound adverse event calls. The 18 months into the engagement, we were able to cut through the overall volume into Manila. The current headcount for this engagement is 56 resources. They all cross-trained with safety specialists to take stability calls related to medical information and event of emergency situations. So the outcome that we have been able to achieve is within 6 months, the backlog for adverse event was decreased by 75%. Within 2 months of taking on product complaints, the backlog has decreased drastically by 80%. Post go live, the inbound call team has met and exceeded the CPIs and KPIs for this project. And most importantly, the team was able to cover up for any kind of disaster that the US and Puerto Rico regions were experiencing, and we've been able to stabilize their call center metrics. So this was it from my end. Thank you very much for your time and have a nice day.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prasad Nayak, General Manager of Cognizant. Finally, for our fourth case study, let us lend our ears to our speaker who will talk about an actual experience of delivering clinical research trial services from the Philippines. Please give a warm welcome to the Philippines Operations Director of Novotech Australia Proprietary Limited Philippine Branch, Ms. Jennifer Olive Arellano.
Hello, I'm Jenny Arellano. I'm the Operations Director for Novotech Philippines. Novotech is a full-service contract research organization providing clinical trial solutions, from monitoring, data management, pharmacovigilance, medical services, and regulatory consulting. In this session, I'd like to give an overview of the clinical trial experience in the Philippines and take you to a case study for one of the trials that we have conducted during the pandemic period. Philippines participated in global industry trials for many years now. Since 2012, the registration of clinical trials at the Philippine Health Research Registry has been made compulsory. There are more than 1,700 research listed in this registry, and more than 500 of which are interventional clinical trials. Since 2020, 28 COVID treatment and COVID vaccine protocols have been approved by the Philippine FDA. 20 of these are global industry-funded trials. A number of US-based sponsors have conducted and included trial sites in the Philippines for their various therapeutic areas. The trial sites in the Philippines are able to deliver high-quality clinical trial data. To date, there has been 15 US FDA inspections conducted in the Philippine sites, 67 of which resulted with no action indicated, while 33% received recommendations or voluntary action indicated. But none of these inspections resulted in official action indicated. This is a snapshot of our experience in Novotech with studies for US-based sponsors, and the table on the left shows the therapeutic areas that we have worked on. An example is a COVID treatment trial where we participated in 2020 and contributed 50 patients to the global recruitment target. The table on the right shows our vaccine experience. While the sponsors for these studies are not US-based, I would like to share with you the strength of the Philippines in the recruitment of vaccine trials. In the last 2 years, we have delivered a total of 2,300 subjects and more than 1,000 of them were enrolled during the pandemic period. Now, let me talk about the case study I mentioned a while ago for one of our trials in which the recruitment started at the onset of the pandemic. This is a study on a rare and life-threatening condition called paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobinuria, or PNH. This study required the patient to return to the trial site every 2 weeks visit interval for study drug administration and laboratory assessment. This study went with a typical process with business development, and we conducted feasibility, obtaining response from 6 investigators in just 5 days. This study was successfully awarded to Novatech in March 2019. We have received the regulatory approvals and the institution ethics approvals in July 2019, just within 50 to 58 days from the submission made. The first clinical study agreement was also executed in September 2019 within 6 weeks of finalization, and thus we were able to initiate our first site in October 2019. However, at this time, the sponsor ran into an investigational product supply issue. This delay pushed back the recruitment for all trial sites by 3 to 4 months. The recruitment was finally opened in February 2020, and a number of patients were immediately enrolled. However, in just a period of 1 month, the COVID-19 lockdown happened in March 2020. Recruitment then was temporarily put on hold. The sponsor put together the COVID-19 study guidelines, and Novatech helped secure the required regulatory and ethics approvals for this. This was done to ensure the safety of the patient, continued supply of investigational product, and the conduct of critical medical assessments. However, a number of changes have been implemented due to the pandemic. Direct-to-patient resupply of study drug has been set up, and Philippines did not have prior experience on this. Novatech and the sponsor had to qualify a vendor for the delivery of the study drug to the patient homes. At the same time, the investigator site had to arrange access for patients to laboratory near their area of residence for the critical safety assessment that need to be performed regularly. One of the key success factors implemented was with the open and immediate communication channel between the sponsor, Novatech, and investigators to support the site in navigating through the changes required in the protocol to ensure patient safety while on treatment. The investigator-patient communication was also heightened to ensure patient was able to follow or comply with study drug administration, and investigators perform regular telemedicine to assess any potential adverse event. Operationally, there were also adjustments that need to be implemented. Some of these include provision of PPE and cost of special transport for the site staff. Protocol deviations also had to be tracked closely, as protocol deviations were inevitable with the trial sites not able to perform all the required protocol procedures. Lastly, monitoring obligations was also challenging to deliver. Remote monitoring resulted in added work for the trial site. The site staff had to identify records before uploading them for access to the Novatech monitors. Despite these challenges, the trial achieved its target recruitment and data cleaning. The Philippines particularly achieved recruitment above target at 150%, and 44% of the global target recruitment was contributed, and 80% of the trial sites were able to deliver its recruitment target. One of the trial sites in the Philippines was audited, and there were no critical findings noted. If you want to learn more about how Novatech can help you with your clinical trials, please visit our website at novatech-cro.com.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jennifer Olive Arellano, Operations Director of Novotech Australia Proprietary Limited, Philippine Branch. Let us now proceed with our panel discussion and open forum involving our key speakers. This will be a free-flowing discussion on the topics shared by our valued speakers, facilitated by 2 moderators. To act as moderators for the panel discussions, the Vice Chair of the Marketing Committee of HIMAP, Mr. J.L. Botor, and the Vice President of HIMAP, Mr. Vincent Remo.
Thank you, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here. And with that, I would like to welcome on the panel the Senior Manager for Revenue Cycle Operations Asia of WordSource, Mr. Don Isip. Would also like to welcome in the panel the President of Connex Global Solutions, Mr. Tim Mobley, and the General Manager of Cognizant, Mr. Prasad C. Nayak.
Thank you, JL. We also have to complete our panel two more panelists. We would like to welcome the Operations Director of the Philippine branch of Novotech Australia, Ms. Jennifer Olive Arellano. Good morning, Jenny. And then finally, morning. Finally, we have the President of Adec Innovations, Mr. James Donovan. Morning, Jim.
Good morning.
Okay, so I'd like to advise our panelists to please turn on your cameras so that the audience could see you. So I'd like to start off our panel discussion and throw in the first question. And I'd like to throw this to Jim. Jim, you have basically talked a lot about talent in your discussion a while ago. Can you kindly give us a scenario where and when you realized that your major services in healthcare are best done or delivered from the Philippines?
Well, first, we were founded in the Philippines, so I hate to say that's the first place that we always go for talent. Going on 25 years now, we've always been able to source great capabilities, but health is a very interesting space, and the development of health services through the years has been quite an interesting journey. While the call center and the BPO industry has had its track, the health grew initially many years ago from transcription world. Literally, 25 years ago, it was primarily transcription in the country. But as it moved up the value chain, I think the world started to discover that our Philippine nurses had a lot more capabilities and could be put in a framework to deliver higher quality work. So first and foremost, we always start in the Philippines because that's been the best value proposition for us for a quarter century. Next is we further extended it by delivering and putting our own front end into the marketplace, into the US, and using Philippine talent located in America. So that's sort of where we start. We sort of start and finish with Philippine talent to deliver value for our customers.
Thank you, Jim. So let me talk on the same topic, but basically ask Jenny Arellano. So Jenny, how does your company ensure the quality and accuracy of the results you provide related to clinical trial? Are you dependent on the talent, the processes, or both?
We're actually dependent on many factors, JL. Basically, quality is driven by very strict processes that we have from start to end of the clinical trial process. And also training of talent is one of the key elements of maintaining quality in clinical trial, not just the Novotech talent who actually monitors the clinical trial, but also the talent at the investigator side, where we have to align our processes with the institution processes in the delivery of clinical trial to ensure that we're actually complying with international standards for the conduct of clinical trial.
Wow. Thank you, Jenny.
Quite interesting. My question would be to Tim Mobley, because his company is actually in Hawaii, but his main workforce is in the Philippines. How did this happen? Is this talent driven, or can you explain about that?
Yeah, thanks, Vince. It is absolutely talent driven. Hawaii is it's a relatively high cost market with a history of very low unemployment, and we struggled to grow. And so I started searching for talent, and Hawaii has a lot of affinity, I guess, with the Philippines, both geographically and culturally. So it was a natural choice, and it's worked out phenomenally well.
Wow, thank you, and it's heartwarming to hear it from somebody like you who has your company in Hawaii. Now, I'll ask my next question to Don. Don, you started as an agent in your company, and you rose up the ranks and became now a part of the management team. So how has your revenue cycle management evolved over the years as you experienced it? And what were the recent changes brought about by the pandemic?
Well, Vince, a lot. I mean, to be honest, I started way back 2014, and we only have like a couple of medical billers, medical coders, and call center. And our main specialization that time is actually more on ER or emergency medicine. And over the years, we have expanded like almost 100 per line of business. So it was a huge growth. And we also have not only here in Manila, but we also have in Iloilo. And then as for the pandemic, we have a big client as well in different states, primarily in Georgia. And it was like a silver lining because everyone is scared because they might lose their job. But in revenue cycle management, we actually doubled because of the COVID testing and vaccines. We added more FTEs here in the Philippines.
Wow, thank you. So talent is really something that brings work to the Philippines, right? Now,
I
I'd
couldn't
like
agree
to,
more.
yeah, thank you. Now, I'd like to circle back to Jim and this time talk about a little bit about the business. I mean, when you were starting your company, and you mentioned in your presentation that there would be incentives for those putting up their company in the Philippines. Can you share your experience as to the remarkable incentives that you enjoyed when you put up your company in the Philippines?
Uh, dur- Great question. During the early years, there was quite a lot of incentives that the government put forward, but really, probably one of the first ones was sponsoring the very first outreach many years ago. I think that was 2001, I believe. And that was really about trying to get the word out and putting in, and we joined those very first sort of ventures when the Philippines was trying to put themselves out there. There was about 8 original companies, and of course, all of the other incentives that the government gives. But for us as a company, I think we enjoyed that the Philippine government, put the effort behind making sure that we had a platform out into the marketplace, into Europe, into America, and with that, we were able to sort of get started. And to be very frank, we haven't looked back. And from a 2-person organization, we're still going forward, and it's born in the Philippines and keep going.
Wow, thank you. Now, similar question to Jenny this time, but I'd like to focus on the challenges. On the other hand, other than instead of the benefits, what would be the challenges that you faced starting and doing clinical trials in the Philippines, and how were you able to address them?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Vincent. Basically, during the pandemic, we were faced with challenges because we were restricted with our movement in terms of setting up the clinical trial. As you know, clinical trial is a regulated industry, and basically we follow strict Philippine FDA regulations and international standards as well, and that requires us to visually see the clinical trial center. And one of the, during the pandemic, one of the restrictions that limited us from or slowed us down in terms of setting up the trial is visiting the trial center itself and ensuring that they meet the qualifications required by the protocol. So a lot of this were done, through digital means. We set up calls and video conferencing with our clients. Even locating the trial site itself, we have to do video conferencing. We had to set up systems where we can share confidential medical records of trial patients so that we can monitor the progress of the trial and the compliance to the protocol itself. So these challenges were overcome because Novatech at that time were already ready with the setup of working flexibly remotely, and without the need really to adjust when we started to do our work from home and setting up the trial remotely. A lot of this, of course, were adjustments also from the site itself. So not all of our investigators would have the access to strong internet while in the hospital doing their work in clinical trial. So a lot of this we had to adjust on evening calls rather than morning calls where there's a lot of competition for internet accessibility. And to date, we have been able to successfully grow the business in clinical trial. In fact, we have grown our FTE double since the start of pandemic in 2020.
I'd like to check on Prasad of Nayak of Cognizant. Prasad, are you in the call? Because I have not seen you in the camera. Prasad, are you in the call? Okay, I think Prasad was dropped off. So let me proceed with asking the question on Tim Mobley. Tim, other than what you shared today, do you have upcoming or ongoing projects that are related to data analytics? So in that light, what other opportunities do you foresee? Is this something that would keep coming, especially for the Philippines as an outsourcing destination?
Yeah, I think so for sure. We do a fair bit of analytics, reporting, data visualization, and one of the activities that's I think where this field and much of the other back office work we do going is robotic process automation is becoming more and more important and will slowly be integrated as human assisted activities for the some of the work that goes into preparing for analytics.
Okay, that's good to know, Tim. Now let me go to Don Isip. So Don, you mentioned about the skills requirement of the coders and billers. So should you have an opportunity to open up another business segment related to the revenue cycle, how quickly do you think can you form a team, and what are the necessary steps to basically ramp up the service with a new client?
Well, JL, across the board, it usually takes 30 to 60 days. It depends on the specialty. If you notice on the presentation earlier, we had a new skill set. It's actually radiology billing. We was able to complete the required FP in 30 days. As long as the associate has a good analytical skills, and that is one of the basics that we're looking for, regardless if you have a background in medical, if you are a nurse, caregiver, or anything in the medical field, that was an advantage. But that was not necessary. As long as you have basic good analytical skills, you will be able to be part of the revenue cycle operations.
Okay, that's nice to know that this is something that we can start on, and I just could imagine that there are certain services that would take longer period just to set it up.
Yep.
Now, I'll circle back to Jim. Jim, for Adec, what is your take on AI, machine learning, and other disruptive technologies? Are they threats to your business, or do they present opportunities for you?
They're enhancers. First, it is a reality. I think it was touched on earlier that basically it's going to be technology led with humans enhancing it behind is going to be the business model. And the quicker that we can adapt to it is the quicker that we can onboard more complicated value added opportunities. So we absolutely see it as the tracking of information is going to be done by blockchain. RPA and AI are going to be enabling things, and any business that's not using business intelligence won't be in business very long. So to be very frank, as an industry, we need to embrace all of these and help our clients along that journey so that they can not only be more competitive, but we can be embedded in that journey with them.
Thank you, Jim. Now, talking of the same technology, let me go to Jenny. Jenny, which part of the clinical trial services are very much dependent on technology? Are there also Philippine-based IT companies who can basically offer such technology platforms, or are you dependent to only the foreign platforms for the matter?
Well, it depends on the process, JL. Basically, the whole clinical trial system requires technology in running the clinical trial. And one of the biggest technology that we use is the technology for gathering the data. And this is where our data management system come in. At this time, there are both global and local data management platforms that can be used. But because of the nature of our business covering global clinical trials, we usually use the global platforms in addressing our data management system.
Okay.
The other platform that we also utilize, coming with the modern times now, are the patient wearables. So these are systems that we actually deploy to the patient to allow us to connect in terms of convenience of collecting data from the patients without the patients coming to the hospital to download those data. So these wearables, as examples like Fitbit watches, for example, will download the data to the data management system that we have on a real-time basis. So these technologies are usually global technologies, foreign technology, but there are now local emerging technologies that they're being developed, especially for the locally funded clinical trials.
Okay.
And since we're talking about technology, I'd like to ask Tim, okay, because he presented about health IT and analytics. In your data analytics service, do you also depend on solutions already available in the market, or are you developing your own tools? How is it for your company?
So there's a mixture. And I know you know this from your business, Vincent, that things like automation and data visualization, you can start with very simple off-the-shelf tools like Excel and Excel macros, and then progress to process automation tools like Automation Anywhere, UiPath, and then sort of progress to custom development. And we do all three depending on the client application and client needs. Obviously, everyone has an interest in starting with simple and inexpensive, but that doesn't meet everyone's needs.
Okay, thank you. Now, Don, this next question is for you. You mentioned about keeping the PHI or the confidential documents safe and secure. Can you expound more on that, particularly on the role of technology in keeping them safe?
Well, as a company, we have invested big time when it comes to information security, since revenue cycle deals with PHI. So what we did is we actually have a dedicated team in charge for this. It was like a hybrid unit of our compliance team and information technology team, who is in charge of everything. And then we have also have a partnership with a couple of companies. I'm not sure if I can say that here, but those are a couple of companies who does scheduled training associated to this nature.
Okay, thank you. JL, I think we have a question in the Q&A box. I'd like to read the first one and ask all the panelists to answer, maybe in 1 minute due to limited time. But the first question is from Jeff Williams. What steps or actions does the Philippines need to take to ensure we stay relevant in the ever-evolving HIM arena? Maybe we'll start with Jim.
We need to, thank you for the question, Jeff. We need to rapidly adopt technology and understand that the business model is shifting in healthcare. COVID has effectively been World War II for the health industry, and therefore it's sort of just opened up all the possibilities because of constrained resources. All of a sudden, you're going to have healthcare at home explode in its capabilities. The hospital is going to move from the physical hospital where you're used to spend 2 or 3 days. You're only going to be spending maybe 8 hours in the hospital, and the balance of your time is going to be spent home. The whole business model is going to change, and it's going to be wired from head to toe, no pun intended, through that journey. How are we going to be able to create services if we are not pushing forward on the technology edge so that we can use our Filipino talent, but only if it's plugged in and on that technology journey? So I think the challenge is that we need to rapidly first acknowledge that the business model of health in 2019 is no longer the business model of 2021. And it's only going to explode in this next few years because it's going to take a few years to roll out. We need to figure out how to adopt. Sorry to run on sentences, but we need to adopt technology.
Thank you.
Yeah, probably Vince, we could ask also Tim on his take on the question.
Yeah, thank you. I had something to add. I'm 100% aligned with Jim. And the only thing that I would add that I think is really important is very close integration with clients and communication. Because if you think about adopting technology for the delivery of home health care or integrating for humans and robots to be working together, it also increases the communication and coordination requirements that are different than sort of historical throw it over the fence outsourcing model or mindset.
Thank you, Tim.
Yeah, let's also hear about the answer. Let's hear the answer from our Filipino executives as well, Don and Jenny. Let's go with Don first, and then Jenny. Thank you.
Well, I couldn't agree more with Jim. I mean, first and foremost, we have to acknowledge and we have to embrace robotics. One of the concern, it's a human nature that we are scared to be replaced by robots. We are scared to be replaced by AI. But no, the good thing about AI and robotics is we as humans can focus on on the most complex aspect of the business, and that is something that people tends to not to see for the time being, and that is something that we have to we have to advocate to the majority, especially to the access and to the associates, so that you know just like what G mentioned, it's a new business model is right now.
Hey, Jenny.
Yeah, in clinical trials, Vincent, basically technology is the way forward. The volume of data that we handle in clinical trial is going to be manageable only with the use of technology, and more in the future where we have now new ways of working with with patients, not necessarily having them physically in the clinical trial centers. The patient wearables, for example, is an example of a technology that we will have to use more and more in the future and adopt this technology, not just from the company's point of view, but also extending this to the patient themselves. And this is where information security and confidentiality, as well as data privacy, will come into place in terms of ensuring that we are, within the bounds of regulations with, the PHR.
Thank you, Jenny. Now, let me read on another question coming from the audience. This came in from Robert Baroque. So, very relevant question. Are there resources within the Philippines with familiarity of U.S. healthcare statute and regulations, both federal and state, that can help local companies navigate contract with the U.S. entities? So let's start it with Tim.
Sure. I was just making a couple notes. That's a pretty broad question, and I think it depends on I presume that they're available, but I know for us, for example, it depends on the nature of the entities and the regulations. So most of our work is with healthcare providers. So we understand the regulations as they apply to claims, submittal claims, Medicare compliance, things like that. But we don't work in pharmacovigilance or clinical trials or those areas. So I guess I think the expertise exists, but it exists within the domain of the services being provided, as opposed to like contacting a healthcare attorney in the US type of expertise.
Yeah, and then probably Jim could chip in.
Actually, I think we need to think a little broader. It exists within our Filipino community. Frankly, the U.S. and Europe is just chock filled with Filipino talent that's been there for years, and that's how we've done it. There is some information in regard to ongoing regulations and the interpretation. Sometimes it's day-to-day interpretations when you're dealing with some of these different hospitals and different systems. So that it helps to have onshore capability, but it is still within the Filipino community. They exist. Not all of them, some have come home to the Philippines, but I would say we need to maybe do a better job of how do we bring in more Filipino talent that exists in the front-facing markets in the UK, in Europe, in America.
Okay, and let's proceed with the highly regulated groups like Jenny. So I believe we're trying to understand who can best coach our local companies in understanding the service line, including the regulations.
Right. As you know, JL, clinical trial is highly regulated. So there are really very specific definitions on how we can conduct the clinical trial. And the beauty about clinical trial is that because this is global in scope now and not just very silo in research in a country, the global scope of clinical trial actually follows a standard international guideline for the conduct of clinical trial. And this where it connects the Philippine talents because a lot of our experience in clinical trial are actually in global industry funded trials rather than in local researches.
Okay. Thank you, Jenny. And probably inputs from Dawn?
Well, just in addition to what Tim and James said, it really depends on the domain. I know for a fact that we have that, but we have to do a much better job in to set it up and have it straightened out. That's it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think,
Thank you, Dawn.
JL, we still have time for one more question. So my last question again to everybody would be about your business and the pandemic. How is the pandemic catching up with your business? How is it affecting your business? 2019, 2020, your plans versus the reality. Can you share the major factors that affected your business? This time, I'd like to start with Jim again.
I hate to. I mean, it sounds terrible, but frankly, we have experienced growth in our business, and we have had a focus on sustainability, environment, social governance for quite a few years, and that has now come to the starting to come to the forefront. And on a matter of heads, we added about 400 staff in the sort of the time of COVID. That's been about 18 months or so. But we are seeing continued growth mainly because the lines of business that we're in are getting a renewed look because of just societies are putting more effort on that, and including health growth. Thank you.
How about you, Jenny?
Yeah, similar to what Jim has mentioned, the pandemic actually has brought us more business in terms of global clinical trial, but this has shifted to a new indication rather than to our traditional indication in the past. And obviously, this indication in COVID was one of that, clinical trial where we have capitalized on the establishment of this trial in the Philippines because of the need as well to participate in this type of trial because of the medical unmet needs.
Now, Don, how about for revenue cycle management?
For the first 3 months of the pandemic last year, it was not easy. It was, everything is on a plateau. But during the end of the year of 2020 and the start of 2021, it went up because of the COVID-19, because of the pandemic. It actually creates another line of business, another field that covers another specialty in medicine, especially in virology and vaccination.
Okay, thank you. Now, circling it up with Tim.
So I think similar experience, I would categorize my pandemic experience has been change, stress, and growth. And so we all know about the change and the stress, and the growth is similar to the other panelists. And I think there's the pandemic created a mindset shift in how and where work can be done. And so clients will come to me, hey, if this can be done from home, it can be done in the Philippines. Or if it can be done this way, it can be done differently. And probably more important than anything was the mindset shift about how and where work has been done.
Wow. So all I can say is that I wish we still have time, but I guess that's all we have for today. And with that, I'd like to thank our panelists. You certainly enlightened everyone on what is actually happening on the ground with your real case studies and also with the in-depth explanation during the panel discussion. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Today's webinar highlighted the value proposition of the Philippines as the destination for business startup and expansion. In terms of skill and talent, infrastructure, government incentives, as well as the support from industry organizations such as HIMAP. More importantly, the webinar also highlighted the track record and the mature experience of the Philippine companies in delivering IT and BPM services to our US clients. The Deputy Chief of Missions of Philippine Embassy in Washington, D.C. formally opened our webinar with an overview of how the government effectively communicated with the U.S. companies the contingencies done in the Philippines to mitigate the effects of the pandemic and assure our U.S. clients that the Philippine companies are open for business despite the lockdowns and the quarantine restrictions. We were welcomed by the Secretary of the Department of Trade and Industry, who gave us an overview of the business landscape in the Philippines, focusing on the current numbers in terms of players, value of investment, talent, infrastructure, government incentives, the new and adjusted policies, and the ongoing coming programs, legal and fiscal reforms to ensure a better business climate for investors and locators. The partnership between the government and the industry brought about more investments in the IT BPM sector, with HIMS being one of the fastest growing subsector. So it was complemented by the presentation of Vince from HIMAP, which showed the landscape specifically for the healthcare information management services sector. Jim Donovan of Adec walked us through their journey in putting up their healthcare business. It serves as a good reference on how they started and grew, including the 1 plus 1 equals 10 formula for growth. The 4 case studies on healthcare IT, revenue cycle management, pharmacovigilance, and clinical research further strengthened the case in point that a mix of talent, capability, and culture makes it worthwhile to expand operations in the Philippines. There are 4 areas, 4 business lines covered in the webinar, but there are more. As pointed out in the presentation of HIMAP, there is a variety of solutions and services offered from the Philippines. The panel discussion highlighted how disruptive technologies are utilized as enablers to facilitate the services and how Philippine companies adjusted and adapted into the new normal to ensure business operation and resiliency amidst the pandemic. It was also pointed out that more and more services, from simple operations to high-value complex processes, are being created with every new engagement with old and new clients, proving the point that the Philippine-based companies are open to flexible engagement models with their clients. So whatever it is that you need at this point, it's the right time to explore the possibility of a partnership with the Philippines. We are here for you. And as we say it in HIMAP, Healthcare Philippines, we care like no other. Thank you very much. And with that, may I invite now our speakers, panelists, and the organizers to turn on your videos for a quick photo opportunities. Gentlemen and ladies. Again, thank you, panelists, and have a good day. Vince?
Okay. So thank you once again to all our speakers and our panelists, and most especially to all of you who attended this webinar and you took time despite your busy schedules. Your presence has made today's webinar a success. Shown on the screen, we have it on the screen already, yes? They're showing on the screen the contact information of the trade offices in the United States, the Board of Investments in the Philippines, and also the Export Marketing Bureau in the Philippines, as well as our industry association, HIMAP. Please feel free to take a screenshot of this slide, and please do not hesitate to contact us for further inquiries. Once again, thank you very much, and we hope to see you again in our future events. Mabuhay!